Welcome, everyone, to another Friday and another episode of the Rational Standard podcast. I'm joined today by Ayanda Zulu and the newly doctored Martin van Staden. I think that we should, if anyone's deserving of the accolade of being a doctor, it's definitely Martin, who has been an extremely influential legal scholar already, despite and now has the title to show for it. But that is
Thanks, Nicholas. But yeah, only from May. You don't get to call me doctor quite yet.
not yet.
But but no, I appreciate the sentiment. Thank you very much.
I don't have a legal degree, so I don't know the laws of these things. Um, Unfortunately, we won't be discussing such happy news today. I think if you are a long-time viewer of the channel, you know we seldom ever discuss happy news, if ever. Um, our first topic of the day is, of course, the military deployment to crime-ridden hotspots around South Africa. So, at the State of the Nation address earlier this month, President Ramaphosa announced that the military, the South African National Defence Force, would be deploying soldiers to hotspots in the Western Cape, primarily the Cape Flats, which, in case you're tuning in from overseas or you don't know, is a very gangster-ridden area in South Africa. In fact, if you so Cape Town has been considered in some rankings as the most violent city in the world. But if you take out the violent crimes that occurred just in these areas, it becomes one of the safest cities in the world, safer than London and New York. It's not saying that much if you think about the crime levels there now. They also will be deploying soldiers in Gauteng, notably to fight construction mafias and to fight illegal miners, as well as the Eastern Cape, which I recently saw Nelson Mandela Bay Metro especially has apparently pipped the Cape Flats as one of the most gangster-ridden areas in South Africa, with extreme rates of gangster-related homicide. So it's very scary. But I think the main thing to discuss here is this has happened in the past before. Most recently in the 2020s, where the army was deployed into townships and into Cape Flats to enforce lockdown regulations. You know, we know how well that went. And also in the weirdly named Operation Lockdown, which was in 2019, before the lockdown. And then also it's happened probably a dozen times since the 90s. And most notably, which I think a lot of people, the NC would not want us to mention, it happened a lot during the 80s and was very much a tactic of the apartheid regime. And in fact, you can argue that a hang of a lot of the socioeconomic spatial problems that we see in the Cape Flats today, which a lot of people would write as one of the leading root causes of gangsterism in the New South Africa, was designing these high density buildings in such a way that you could create kill zones for the military to monitor and actively oppress the citizenry. Now, the SANDF today is not even competent enough to really oppress the citizenry. I would say that's small mercies. But I think that what we really need to get down here is this actually, what is the purpose of this? I think I want to start with you, Ayanda. Do you think deploying the army is actually solving the root cause of criminality in this country?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nicholas, for that introduction. I think it does provide a lot of necessary context on this issue. But before I get to that, I also wanted to congratulate Martin on completing his LLD. That's a great achievement, man. Great achievement. Truly inspiring, truly inspiring that he has gone the distance, done his LLD. He's now at the final point, so just from me, great work to him. I think he's, to his intellect, to his strong work ethic, man, I think, yeah, very, very exemplary, very inspiring. And for someone like myself, who also someday wants to go that route that not many people go through, that is inspiring. This is someone that I work with in the office. So well done to him on that, and the good thing about him is that he won't be flexing his credentials, in our faces like other people do. He engages. So that's a great thing. But to your thing, Nicholas, to your thing. This is something we actually discussed last week in last week's episode. It was me, Martin, and David. And this was part of our post-Sona analysis, of course, reflecting on what was said in the address, and what measures and what policies are going to sort of be taken to address some of these issues. And one of the things that was raised was this thing of the deployment of the SANDF to areas across the country like the Western Cape that have been severely affected by crime. And the point I made was that if the intention is to provide immediate relief to those communities, if that's the intention, to provide immediate relief, to get criminals off the streets, then I don't think that solves the problem. And there are two reasons for that. Two reasons. The first being that, as you've alluded correctly, Nicholas, the SANDF in this country has been consistently underfunded for years now. It is in a bad shape, under-resourced. Many of our officers are poorly equipped. They cannot, carry out their responsibilities or their functions effectively. And a good case study of this was the DRC mission. I mean, look at how that turned out. That showed us that there's a huge problem with the SANDF. But the second reason here, which is also another important one, which you've touched on, is these are soldiers. They're not trained in the same manner that police officers are trained in. They're trained for warfare. They're trained for combat. So if you're saying they should assume the responsibilities that we would ordinarily assign to police officers, you can create certain issues, because once they're in communities, they're going to conduct themselves in ways that can be very harmful to civilians. We saw this back during the COVID lockdown, right? There was the whole Collins Khoza thing, which Martin touched on in our last episode. So these are soldiers, they aren't police officers. That's another issue. But the main issue here is the SAPS itself, which should be the organ of the state that we use to tackle crime effectively. The main problem here, of course, is one which I don't know whether to call him the former police minister or what, because he still receives a salary, and this frustrates me. He's not supposed to be paid. He's not a minister, but former Minister Senzo Mchunu said this at the Madlanga Commission, that the SAPS in this country lacks the capacity to tackle crime effectively. We don't have the resources. We don't have the human power. This is what he said at the Madlanga Commission. So how do you address that? If you want to tackle crime, if you want results, immediate results in the short to medium term, then you decentralize policing, you devolve policing powers in the country, you allow provinces to be a part of that strategy or initiative to fight crime. Each and every province establishes its own independent policing unit with its own crime infrastructure, its own personnel, and that immediately adds more capacity to the system. You have more visibility, you have more people on the ground, and that gives you a better chance of fighting crime more effectively. That's if the goal is immediate relief. Now, onto the root problems or the underlying drivers of crime in South Africa, which you've spoken about, Nicholas, but also Brett Heron of the Good Party, who I'm not a fan of, but I think he wrote a very interesting article this past week on this thing, lambasting the government for deploying the SANDF, saying it won't solve the underlying drivers of gangsterism in the Western Cape particularly. And I agree with him because, as you said, in many ways, this violence is symptomatic of social dysfunction, right? Broken families, broken social institutions. There's also the question of lack of opportunity in these areas as well. So this is a valid discourse. I think it should be part of the conversation. We should be trying to understand the underlying drivers of crime or violent crime in these communities. But the concern I raised to Brett, and I commented on his article, I said, the questions you're raising of reform, of rebuilding society, rebuilding the foundations of society, building stronger families, strengthening social institutions, these are not things you can do over the course of 1 year, over the course of 2 years. These are things which take time to fix. It takes years to rebuild society, to rebuild the foundations of society. And so my concern is you're almost suggesting that we need to wait for all those years before we can actually deal with this crime problem effectively. And my point to him was, I think we need a holistic strategy here that says we must provide immediate relief to communities. I don't think people in this country who live in violent communities can wait for another day for crime to be brought under control. They simply can't. So you need a strategy that speaks to the immediate issues, that says we need to get criminals off the streets as soon as possible. But that strategy also needs to speak to, of course, these deeper problems or the underlying drivers to say, let us also work on resolving these things over the medium to long term so that this response can adequately address all these issues. But the concern is you sort of suggesting that we have to wait or we have to do all this work over these years before we can attend to the problem. I don't think that is entirely accurate. I think we can attend to the crime issue immediately. We can. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to devolve policing powers. You have to devolve policing powers. We know for a fact that the SAPS simply does not have the capacity. They cannot tackle this issue alone. And if you do that, I think in the short to medium term, there can be gains just in terms of reducing the level of crime.
I think you're exactly right, Ayanda. Devolving police, we need to do that 100%. Because I think that the issue here, I think we can all agree, crime, big scourge in this country. And I think that I can see the appeal that people want to put more bodies on the street to stop the violence, to discourage this violence from happening. I think that this headline, though, kind of highlights why we aren't really confident in the military to be able to solve this issue. Because one, because they're not trained to do so. They've trained for combat with other militaries where they can shoot at them. They're not actually meant to be stop and frisk people. They're not meant to be people who deal with the community. They're supposed to be in a trench and shooting at the enemy. That's what they're trained for. And if we train them to deal with communities, then they're not going to be good soldiers anymore. And as much as some people might want to delude themselves into thinking that we might never need a military, there's always a possibility that we might need to. We've got the Islamic State owns northern Mozambique. Zimbabwe is a crackpot dictatorship that may one day think, hey, why don't we go south to distract from our own problems? Things can always happen. Like a lot of people thought World War I would be a ludicrous notion because Germany and Britain were best friends. Then they went to war. Things like that can always happen. You always have to have a military, and it needs to be trained properly to deal with military matters. I think the problem, though, that goes to the root of why this constant idea that happens all the time, where they just deploy soldiers and deploy more bodies, hire more police, put visible policing. That's the ANC's strategy. That's their approach to law enforcement since the 90s, is it doesn't actually work. Because all it does is you say, okay, you have a policeman at this corner. Best case scenario, the criminal just waits until the policeman leaves because they can't be everywhere at once, and then they commit their crimes. What actually happens in Africa, because our police are so underfunded, so underskilled, undertrained, all that, is that police end up just becoming victims of crime themselves, and the military becomes victims of crime themselves. So it ends up... So visible policing doesn't work. Visible soldiers don't work. All it's going to do is at best give the criminals a little bit of a holiday, and then at night when the soldiers can't see and don't understand this labyrinthian community that they're in, which, because it's not their job, they're not trained for that, when a good cop should be trained for that, because a good cop should be from the community that they're policing. I think what I'm trying to get up to here is that we need an intelligence approach to policing. The way to solve organized crime in this country, the mafias, the legal miners, the drug gangs, the human traffickers, all of it, is we need snitches, we need detectives, we need to devolve policing, not just on a local level, on a geographical level, but also in different specialties. There shouldn't just be one South African police service. There should be the police, which deal with visible policing, responding to crimes, minor investigations. There should be a detective agency, like in the pre-1994, detectives were their own hierarchy, and they answered to themselves. They were separate from the inevitable corruption of beat cops. And they functioned really well. They were kind of like the FBI. They were focused on high-scale investigation, and they did very well at it. Then I think we should also keep our tactical team separate. Because yes, there is a space for the cops to come in and do militaristic style operations, but they still have to be trained for that. It needs to be very limited. And we've shown that, like, actually, and I know this might be controversial, some of these special tactical teams in KZN have actually proven to be quite good. They've actually proven to do their jobs well, far better than the army actually has been. Because the army's just standing there carrying their guns and getting their guns stolen. But here's the question, my question for you, Martin. We've had this over so many years, and they keep doing it again. And they just put it, they keep deploying these soldiers. It's not fixing anything. Yet populists like Gacy McKenzie keep supporting it, saying, "Oh, hear our cries." Even Helen Ziller called for it in the past. I think she's kind of changed her tune. I know Hill Lewis says it's a very bad idea, but a lot of South Africans still have this idea that, okay, no, we need to deploy soldiers, and the government keeps doing it. Is this just desperation? Is it stupidity? What is the reason?
Yeah, thanks, Nicholas. The issue is, I think, that too many South Africans, certainly even among opposition figures, have a status quo bias. There's something of an inability to think outside of the box. Now, Ayanda alluded to this earlier. There is only one solution to violent crime sustainably in this country, and that is family values. That's it. Done. Family values. That's it. Violent crime is finished. Not one of the three of us are going to commit a murder or a rape anytime soon because we were raised by parents and by extended families and by communities who kind of inculcated those values in us. They didn't just say, "Hey, Martin, Nicholas, Ayanda, don't kill, don't rape," and we're like, "Cool, we won't do it." We lived it. We lived in that value, in that ecosystem. So it's not just about, okay, so these kids have to go to LO, life orientation, in school, and they're going to be told that rape is wrong, and now they won't rape. No. They have to grow up from birth up to the age of 18 in a happy, productive, uh, I would say religious, but let's not get into that kind of moral structure. They have to live it. Everything around them has to has to ooze morality. And then you have, and this is normal. I'm not describing something that's kind of fantasy. This is how most people in the peaceful world grow up. So that is how you solve it. That is not something the government can do. The government cannot even begin to solve that problem. But there are things that the government can do, and that is to address the symptoms of crime. And addressing the symptoms of this problem is actually quite easy. And the Free Market Foundation ran its Section 12 initiative last year. It's still, all the information is still available at section12.org.za. And that is effectively the policy and community things that can be done right now to solve violent crime, specifically violent crime. And we kind of formalize it into 4 Ds. The first D is what everyone talks about. It's development. We do need more police officers. We do need more detectives. We do, and we need better police officers and better detectives. We do need more prosecutors and more and better prosecutors. A key thing that's often missed is that we need more prison capacity. Everyone always, when I say this, people kind of cringe and they're like, don't say that. We're not really addressing the issue. It's like, no, we need skyscrapers of prison capacity in this country. Like, you should be able to see them for kilometers in every direction. We need prisons that large in this country to house the absolute armies of violent criminals that we have who are not brought to justice. And our prisons that we already have are long since overfull. Like, they're long since overfull. So even if the army goes out and they round up like hundreds of these gangsters, like every day you have like lines of gangsters being put in buses. It's like, where are these people going? What are we doing? Where are you taking these people? Like, we don't even have like the El Salvadorians. We don't even have, let's call it what it is, concentration camps that are ready to take these prisoners. We don't have that. And I think if we start building the concentration camps, that would be a good thing. We need the capacity for all these people. But we don't, and they're not planning to build it because everyone knows that the deployment of the army is meaningless. It's a performative gesture. It's a symbol. So that's development. The next key thing that is probably the most controversial is decriminalization. We in South Africa, specifically in South Africa, I'm not now making a libertarian point about, victimless crimes, blah. Like, that is all valid. But in South Africa, we cannot afford to have police detectives, prosecutors, prison wardens wasting their time going after, I don't know, bloody junkies smoking weed, or even white collar junkies doing cocaine. We don't have time or resources to do that. Our police and criminal justice infrastructure has to be devoted 100% to the violent crime crisis that is going on in this country. Let fraud be dealt with through the civil courts, let people sue each other for fraud. Just remove the police from that stuff. Focus on violent crime, and it's not something that has to take years. We can solve that quickly, and then you can get back to all the other things. So that's the other thing, decriminalization. We have to take off a lot of these other crimes off the table so that the police can focus. uh, Decentralization, you've both gone into that. Obviously that needs to be done, and it's not just provinces that need to be acknowledged as having this power. Municipalities need to take more need to have a more generous perception of the law enforcement powers that they already have. Cape Town is being very naughty on this. They go out of their way to interpret their power to enforce the law very narrowly. They go out of their way to say that this is a narrow power when they need not. They can say that we have a broad power. So they need to change that mentality. And then communities and private security companies. I've said this before, people get mad at me, it's fine. Private security guards need to be deputized as police officers. Like, we have an army of private security in this country. Sure, maybe add some kind of training course that they need to go through at our police academies. That is fine, do that. But we have this massive untapped pool of people who can exercise police-like powers and really help secure South Africa. Now, I know all the critics. I know privatization of policing. How dare you? Yes, we need to do that. Sorry. So decentralization, and then the last one is more of a theoretical thing, but definition. We need to understand what is criminal in South Africa. Currently, that is not clear. Everyone knows the big crimes, but many of us, I think, this podcast will soon need to be registered or something, and if we don't, then it will be a crime. We need to know that those are crimes. So those are the 4 Ds that the Free Market Foundation has proposed to deal with violent crime, and that these are not difficult things. You don't have to change the constitution to do it. You don't have to make massive legislative changes to do it. These are things for which you just need a little bit of political will, but we don't, because as I said at the start, we have massive status quo bias in this country. It's like, oh, we have an army, so let's deploy the army. I am not in principle against deploying the army under the circumstances that we have in South Africa. Like, we have war zone level, like actual war zone levels of crime in this country. So deploying the war fighters to deal with it is not by itself necessarily the worst idea, except we're talking about the SANDF. We are not talking about the United States Army. We're not talking about the British Army. We're not even talking about the Botswanan army, which I assume is far more professional, or the Rwandan army, certainly. That is far more.
Lesotho beat us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's not talk about that too much. But like, we're not talking about, and I hate being so kind of seemingly ad hominem against who I know there are many good soldiers in the army, but the South African army is a joke. I'm sorry, that's just how it is. Our military is unprofessional. Our military is politically compromised. Every time that there is a budget vote, they cut the funding of the military, and I'm blaming the military. I'm not blaming the politicians. The military has to be able to lobby for itself. Like, there should be civilian control of the military, but there should be a healthy fear from the civilian administration, or at least a healthy respect from the civilian administration for the top brass of the military. When General this and this comes to see you and you're a minister, you should be like, oh my goodness, I need to sit up straight and I need to take this guy very seriously now. That is not happening in South Africa. I mean, we don't have a navy anymore. We don't have an air force anymore. Like, who are the people who are supposedly running these things? Like, when they go to the minister probably says, listen, reschedule, I'll talk to the chief of the Air Force next year or something. It's like, this is the military's fault. They need to lobby for themselves. Like, no one else is going to lobby for them. So the South African military is a joke. The KZN riots of 2021, July 2021, that was effectively an insurgency. That was a rebel uprising. And the military, well, first the police hid away in their police stations, and then the military deployed only after communities and security companies brought order to the situation. Private communities and private security companies had to save police stations. And then when that was all done, when the smoke had settled, suddenly you have troops arriving on the scene. Thank God. So no, this is a silly gesture. Like, you don't even have to be worried. It's not like they're going to oppress us. I mean, sure, there's going to be potentially Colin scores us type situations, but these are not going to be at any grand scale. The military does not have an iron fist or even an iron boot that it can bring down on anything. And that is why this is all just so performative. It's just lame. Like, it's another one of the insults that Cyril Ramaphosa has thrown at South Africans, because crime is actually not a difficult thing to solve in the moment. Like, the only thing that we have the breakdown in values, but the only reason criminals in South Africa feel so free, like Zama Zama's walking around kind of openly and publicly in towns with their guns, is because they know that there is no resistance. You don't solve the underlying issue of resistance, but resistance does eliminate criminality in the moment. Neighborhoods in South Africa that have put up special ratings areas where they boomed off entryways and deployed community security patrols, crime falls to zero there. Zip, nothing. Crime falls to zero just because there's a little bit of resistance. And the more communities do that, the more crime will fall to zero there, and criminals will be funneled to townships, unfortunately, to squatter camps, where there is even less resistance. So the question then is, we need resistance. The army can, in theory, provide resistance. Our army is not going to provide the resistance. So this is actually a very simple thing, and I've recommended ad nauseum to Cape Town some ideas outside the box. All of them are outside the box, because you can't solve the issue of the current ANC interpretation of how to solve crime, which Cape Town is obsessed with. Like, it was just reported, it's actually still in the news now, that there was a shooting on the N3 highway in Cape Town where they want to build that wall. And there's kind of people taking photos of these guys just standing on the side of the highway shooting at motorists. And it's like, you know that this happens, Cape Town, not SAPS. Forget that the SAPS exists. Cape Town, why do you not have 200 Cape Town law enforcement officers constantly on that roadway, just all the time? How can you not? Like, if there's one Cape Town law enforcement officer anywhere in Simonstown, like a safe nirvana, you should ask yourself, Cape Town, why is he there? Why in God's name is there a law enforcement officer in Simonstown? He cannot be there. He needs to be in the Cape Flats. And this is a lesson.
Sorry to jump in there. Crime has actually escalated quite a bit in Simonstown, so we actually do need some cops there.
Sure, but you can identify hotspots. So, I mean, this is just something that Cape Town Police, Western Cape Police, national police all over the show just cannot comprehend. And I've always found this specifically to be so bizarre, so utterly bizarre. Like in Pretoria, Ayanda will be familiar with this area. There's something called the Fountain Circle. It's a highway kind of where you go. It's kind of the gateway to Pretoria, near Unisa, and it's a hot spot for people to smash open people's windows and take like a handbag. Like, every morning that happens, and I've never seen just a police car just sitting there. Like, it's a known hotspot. We have these signs on the road in areas in this country: hijack hotspot. Are you serious? Like, you know, it's a hijack hotspot, but there's no cops. What are you doing? So no, I mean, kind of my big point here is that we are underthinking crime and we are overthinking crime at the same time in the most bizarre possible way. Like we're underthinking it by doing what Brett Heron and other people do, and that's saying, "Ah, it's poverty, it's poverty, it's poverty," as if the starving people of Ethiopia are as violent as the far more prosperous South Africans. No, it's not poverty. Poverty has bugger all to do with it. It's family values. That's it. It's family values. So there we're underthinking it, but we're overthinking it in other respects. In that, oh, we have to develop these strategies, and oh my God, we have to kind of form these task teams. No, you just need bodies. Like not visible policing, present policing. You need present policing, and that's something that we just lack in spades. And this is such a simple, immediate problem to solve.
Thank you. We lost Ayanda for a second, but he should be back. In the meanwhile, I just want to respond. I agree with you. Actually, no, Ayanda's back. Ayanda, cool. You can jump right in before I respond to Martin.
Yeah. This connectivity is fighting us, and there's such important points to make here. Martin has went in and made all these important points, and I just want to refer back to two of them, just two of them. The one is on decriminalization, and then the other is on another issue I'll get to, but I'll try to be quick and not waste time. The first thing here about decentralization, and this is something I've also asked Martin before about, but I also support that view, and I support it because of what I've seen myself on the ground, right? So in Tshwane, but this seems to be an Action SA thing as well, right? Because even the president, when he was mayor of Johannesburg, he was going around closing, these brothels down and everything, cracking down on them. And the mayor in Tshwane now seems to be doing the same thing. Now, the argument for decriminalization, I think, can be made from an ethical point of view, but also from a practical point of view. I won't go into the ethical side of it. From a practical side of it, right? Because the argument that people often make, and this of course is controversial, the argument that they make is that this kind of work, right, in these night establishments is inherently exploitative. The women are inherently oppressed and everything. And the argument you sort of want to make in response to that is to say no. The reason why you find them working in precarious conditions and so forth is because the industry itself is operating underground. It's literally operating underground. And that is what leads to that. So even if you have a woman who works right in that industry being raped, for instance, you can't go to a police station and report that, right? Because you yourself, the work you're doing itself, in and of itself, is a criminal offense. So it isn't the work itself inherently which leads to that. It's the fact that it's operating underground. So you have no protection virtually if you're working in that space. But the other thing which concerns me is because the entire industry itself is illegal, it's not supposed to be operating, it's against the law. In order for you to run those establishments, you need to pay rent, right, to officials. And we know this in the city of Tshwane. There's organized networks, right, of people who are linked to these establishments where they're operating, and you know for a fact that the owners here are paying some kind of fee to law enforcement agencies. And that concerns me because you drive corruption within the law enforcement agencies. Whereas if this thing was illegal, if these establishments weren't illegal, you would not need to have a situation where people are being bribed or rent is being paid. So from a practical point of view, I think it makes sense to say, decriminalize some of these things and redirect these resources, as Martin has noted, to areas that we need to attend to, which is violent crime, fighting violent criminals, not chasing boys around who are carrying, small packets of weed and whatnot. That is not an efficient use of resources publicly. But to my next point here, which I wanted to make, and it specifically ties into the KZN police, which you've mentioned, Nicholas. And I want to start by saying that I have no problem with police officers defending themselves, right? In instances where aggression is initiated against them and their lives come under threat. You are well within your rights as a police officer to do that. That's an important point to make. But here's the thing about the SAPS in KZN, and you can correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but much of the infrastructure, the SAPS infrastructure in that province, has been compromised by organized criminal networks, by organized networks of hitmen as well. So in some cases, you have police officers within the police force who are contracted by the organized networks that they are linked to go and commit crimes on behalf of other criminals. So you have a situation where, let me make an example with me, right? I'm a mafia, for instance, and I have certain police officers on my payroll in the SAPS who I contract to go and do my dirty work for me. Why is that concerning? It's concerning for me because in some of these cases, and this ties back to Calvin Matibeli, who was in the media this past week, this big ANC businessman who's linked to the ANC. One of the things that he said, which I found concerning, was that it may be that in some of these cases,
we lost Ayanda. Oh, damn. I think that someone's sabotaging Ayanda here. The government's finally clamped down on our podcast.
National standard, yeah. The Soliman
Perfect,
Latsi is coming for us.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Ayanda can jump right back in when he gets back. I'm just going to throw my 2 cents in and then he can finish. I'm just going to just respond to you. You talk about private security being deputized. It's kind of funny that they kind of basically already are. So I found out a friend of mine got arrested by a mall cop, by a mall security guard when he was 11 and spent 7 hours in a mall jail. So, okay, go on his back so you can... So, you back?
Yeah, geez, I was almost done, but I was saying to you, what you don't want is a situation where police officers can take people out, can use excessive force in situations where it isn't justified. Because as I've said, there are situations where excessive force is justified if your life comes under threat as a police officer. But this situation we have, where we have no recording infrastructure in our country, we have no body cams, we have no dash cams, so police officers can do as they please. And when they report to the media, they were like, no, these guys fired at us first. When that didn't happen, I think that for me is extremely, extremely concerning, especially given the kinds of police officers we have in this country, as I've said, who some of them are linked to organized criminal networks. It cannot be allowed. It is a dangerous thing, and it is something which needs to be, in my view, attended to. The SAPS by now was supposed to pilot some of this infrastructure, dash cams and body cams. They are supposed to be piloting it with some of their officers. They haven't till this day. So we have a situation where we are interacting with police officers in this context, and anything can happen. And in that case, it would be your word against theirs, because there's no, footage, there's no evidence that we can refer back to say, maybe in this case or in this encounter, you as police officers were supposed to apprehend these guys. You weren't supposed to fire at them.
That's actually a very good point. And I actually, I'm ashamed that I didn't actually think about the fact that a lot of these special task teams are actually captured by organized crime, because it very much is par for the course in South Africa. I should have thought about that. I think that I just, and we definitely need body cams and dash cams. That should go without saying. So definitely in agreement with you. This actually goes on to my point quite well, which is that the thing which so many people in South Africa miss, and this is the problem with the visible policing strategy, and even the problem with the special task team problem, is the biggest disincentive to criminality is the possibility of being prosecuted. And the problem in South Africa doesn't have that, because we don't have enough detectives who are competent enough to collect evidence to take people to court. Our cops bungle things up all the time because there's a lot of police brutality in South Africa. So it's not that police are also weak and pitiful and they're doing something. When they are doing something, they're abusing their power, or they're destroying evidence, or they're contaminating crime scenes. So then people can't be prosecuted, or they're working for the organized gangs in the first place. So we can't prosecute criminals. So the only risk then is, okay, they're going to get shot. But as much as some people might want to have this romantic idea of, oh no, we just need to kill these criminals, we should bring back the death sentence, just that's how we're going to do it. No, we live in a civilization, as to misquote the Joker, as everyone else, we live in a society. And for that to be something worth living in, something to function, we have to have the presumption of innocence till proven guilty. So I agree with you, and we shouldn't just be celebrating cops just going and killing people, especially when we don't have body cams to prove that they're doing it in self-defense or not. And I think that my final point here is that actually, no, before that, sorry, because Martin, you brought up something about the cops policing the N2 and how there's a big misallocation of resources. And I agree with that completely. And just, it's so sad that so much in this country is just so unnecessarily dumb. And I was like, I can't put it any other way. It's just everything from our public works program where we have something running for 7 years to pave a road and then no one's working on the road. I'm like, okay, you could finish this in fucking a week, but they just don't. South Africa, like, I know this is your favorite because your traffic cops, traffic regulations. I know that's your favorite, Martin. But let's just presume the traffic laws are actually worth enforcing. Traffic cops just don't do it. Like, there's a road near where I live where there's people parking on both lanes, just blocking traffic. This is a proper road that people need, a thoroughfare, and the people just park like that. And they just, in the case like that, and I'm just thinking, the traffic department could probably pay its entire yearly budget just by ticketing this one road consistently. They never come. They never do it. Instead, they don't hold taxis to account when every morning when I have the misfortune of being on the roads, the taxis literally drive on the pavement where there's pedestrians. No traffic cops. And I've seen traffic cops just standing there and do nothing. I think that just, I think that I think the traffic law is a microcosm of how bad law in South Africa is. But I think that's a good spot to move on to our next topic, which is, much calmer. It is on the topic of foreign interference in our local politics, specifically a new report by Forbidden Files. I've actually forgotten the name of the organization which cracked this case. Forbidden Stories, yes, which sounds weird. I know it sounds like, but it actually is a reputable organization made up of whistleblowers and journalists, especially operating in or around localities which are known for killing journalists, which South Africa has become one, and Russia definitely is. But they've uncovered a long misinformation campaign going into spending over $7 million, if not more, on discrediting the DA. The main thing that the story highlights is a campaign where fake photos and fake news of the DA apparently ordering these racist mugs to drink, not faces, and they disseminated it on social media. And now it's apparently, according to the report, has led to a belief that it prevails in the mainstream still, for some reason, that the DA wants to bring back apartheid and is a racist party, despite the fact that it is the most multiracial, multiculturally diverse party in South Africa. For all of our other problems with it, it cannot be accused of being racist or wanting to bring back apartheid. It's ludicrous. But this still persists. And I find it weird that we're only discussing this now on a mainstream level, because I'm pretty sure I've brought this up in previous podcasts and I have written about it. Because in the run-up to the previous national election, I saw a huge rise in these weirdly innocuously named Facebook pages and social media pages, things called like Global News or Today's News, those weird things which just sounds like just a normal news site. And they would be posting things about how like Helen Zille is having an affair with Satan, or John Steenhuisen admits to being a Satanist and eats babies. And then they'll do stuff like that, but then also do things which like John Steenhuisen announces that he wants to bring back apartheid. And they would say all these random things. And the problem is, we laugh at that stuff, but there's enough voters who believe this stuff, especially because South Africa can be, to a degree, quite a superstitious country. We're quite a religious country as well. It's besides that. So if enough people can keep subconsciously putting to your head that, hey, this is not a party for religious people, not a party for people who actually, don't want to have Satanists ruling them, they might actually let that inform their views. And I think that's the big thing with a lot of this psychological operations, is you just keep flooding the media until people don't know what's true anymore. And I think that especially generations which are used to trusting everything they read, looking at you boomers, they and it's not their fault because it was so tightly controlled. Information was so tightly controlled back then, they didn't really have a choice. And that's why I find that so many older people struggle to deal with the internet now, because they are used to just trusting the first thing that they read. But has been, but I think the main question, and I want to put this to you, Martin, first. Do you think that this is big? First, do you think this is big news? Do you think this is just the DA trying to come up with excuses? Do you think this has actually led to unfairly damaging the DA's reputation?
Okay, so this is a big thing, and it's not really just a South African thing. This is a modern knowledge, modern information thing. Let me start with the DA. I think this is the simpler part of my answer. The DA is being very opportunistic with this thing that's now come out. So since I can remember, since I became politically conscious, there has been this idea that the DA is a white party and that it wants to bring back apartheid. This idea has just been omnipresent since I can remember. So this is maybe, let's call it, the standard criticism of the Democratic Alliance from, for lack of a better word, radical black nationalists. There's some kind of white wokes kind of who exist in that ecosystem as well. But this is a thing that exists in South Africa, and it's no surprise that disinformation campaigns from Bell Pottinger, from the Russians, whatever, would then kind of tap into that and try and accentuate it. But this is something that exists in South Africa. Now, this has been a thing that the DA has had to deal with for many years. It's dealt with it successfully and unsuccessfully to various degrees, and it hasn't abated. Over the last, let's call it half a year, let's say specifically over the last 3 months, the Democratic Alliance has been criticized by its traditional supporters across all races for mismanaging its position inside the Government of National Unity, for deferring excessively to the ANC, deferring excessively to established policy. These are real people, real organizations criticizing their party, mostly their party, for betraying its voters and its mandate. And the DA people now are ascribing this criticism to the Russian bot campaign or whatever, the Russian disinformation campaign. And I find this actually to be it's quite immoral of them to be doing this, of the DA to be doing this, because it's this idea that this party can do no wrong, and any criticism of us is from these paid Russian accounts, even though the very report notes, I think quite clearly, that this is a very specific kind of discrediting operation by the Russians, and that is to kind of create the impression that the DA is kind of anti-black, anti-revolution, whatever, what have you, kind of pro-Satan, those kinds of things. The Russians aren't planting the seed that John Steenhuisen is being illiberal by not allowing people to vaccinate their own cattle. That is not a Vladimir Putin line. That is actually something that John Steenhuisen is doing and which he is being criticized for. So I am very kind of cross with a lot of the people in the DA who are now using, oh, Russiagate is now just any criticism of us is the Russians. That's the first thing. I think that's relatively easy. The second thing is far harder. And I think this is one of those problems without a solution. It has never been the case since the rise of what we can broadly call media. This is newspapers, books, podcasts, radio, television. Since that has started being a thing, you have had what is now called disinformation, or what we kind of old school people call lying. Like, lying is something that we have always done, and what the media has always done, and what everyone has always used the media to do. The United States is engaged in propaganda, Russia engages in propaganda, Qatar engages in propaganda, Israel engages in propaganda, The Free Market Foundation engages in propaganda. The ANC engages in propaganda. We all do this. It's not always lying. At least we don't see it as lying. Our opponents will always see what we say as lying, and we will always see what our opponents say as lying. We've had discussions on this podcast before about who is the committee out there that determines what is true. I'm not a postmodernist, but the postmodernists do have a point when they say that be humble when you take an idea and you declare it to be the capital D truth. We need to be very careful about that. And that does mean, unfortunately, that when it comes to disinformation, even by Qatar, even by Russia, even by China with TikTok, I do not think there is anything that we can do about this. I do not think, and specifically that governments can do about this. We can say ban TikTok. We can say ban Islamic schools and so on, whatever. It will find a different route. It will come through News 24 then. It will come through Facebook. It will just happen. This is like being submerged in water. You just cannot do anything about it. And I feel, and this is my worry, is that this problem is it's so omnipresent that it is virtually manna from heaven for authoritarians, because everywhere you look there is now disinformation. Granted, yes, of course, but the governments now want to do all sorts of things to extend state power, restrict freedom of expression, and so on. So my solution, and this is not much of a solution, is you need to do just absolutely nothing. You have to leave it. Leave the Russians, leave it alone, let them do it. Because if there are South Africans who are stupid enough to read, oh, Helen Zille is in an affair with Satan, and they're like, oh God, Helen Zille is in an affair with Satan, banning these people who have now created this story does not solve the problem here, which is that this individual is so bloody stupid that they cannot actually discern reality from obvious lies. And maybe there's a lot of people like that. My own view is that we need to be far more circumspect about how far we extend the franchise, just specifically because of issues like that. Like, not everyone has to be a citizen. Like, participating in the governance of society doesn't mean you should have fewer rights or liberties, but not everyone is cut out for that. And we need to be honest about that. And curating information for them to try and make them citizenable or citizenish is not going to work, because you're entrusting that to political actors who are going to curate the information that benefits them. So as far as the current kind of zeitgeist, the current reality of institutions is concerned, I think we need to do exactly bugger all about this, because there is nothing that we can do that is actually going to solve the problem and that is going to retain basic liberties like freedom of expression and freedom of association. You're gonna, if you want the government to do something, you're gonna give up a hell of a lot of freedom without solving the problem, because the disinformation is not gonna go away. It's just part of life now. Long term, please, people, you need to start raising better children. I mean, I'm always gonna come back to this. You need to raise your kids to have a basic grasp of reality. This is not about feeding them just random information. They need to have the skill set to determine when something is just so ridiculous that it cannot be true, and they need to have the skill set to go and look into an issue further. It's not a question of information, it's a question of a skill, a very basic skill that I hope most people in the world have, but a lot don't, and that's a danger. But that is how you solve this problem, is you raise truth seekers, you have to reconsider franchise. I'm sorry, this is, if you're worried about democracies being stolen by disinformation, that's not the fault of the disinformation. Everyone is always going to be propagating their views. That is the fault of citizens too easily believing utter kind of tripe, obvious nonsense. That is the problem, and that means you have to be a little bit more circumspect with who gets to vote in your society. But right now, as we sit here, there's no solution, and South Africans need to actually kind of call the DA out for how opportunistically it is using this revelation to kind of just silence all criticism.
I think that there is one thing that I would do. Well, I think the governments, not South African government, because they're on the wrong side, but the Western government should do in response to these targeted disinformation campaigns. Because there's not, as this comment said, it would be like a game of digital whack-a-mole. I agree with you. You can't actually stop it. As much as I do err on the side of banning TikTok, and the reason is because I don't think it is actually a freedom of speech platform. I think it is a very insidious platform that does effectively almost do advanced brainwashing of our youngest and most vulnerable. But that's another story. But I do think that Western governments should be fighting fire with fire, not in the sense of trampling on their own freedom of speech laws, but more in that they should be doing what they did during the Cold War, which is running Radio Free Europe, Radio Free China, which exist, but they're just underfunded. They don't get their support anymore. Put in literature into these countries to encourage their own people to resist. It worked during the Cold War. It could work now. Just that during the 90s, the Western governments thought it was the end of history. They thought that we didn't need to do anything anymore, so they just stopped. And no, and then what happened in the vacuum? The Cold War never ended. Russia just regrouped under different, going from a fascist oligarchy with a ham and sick on its flag to a fascist oligarchy that with a ripple for the French flag as its flag. And China, it just became a much more effective, scary form of communism, which decided, hey, let's get rid of it's terrifying because they got rid of the most unstable aspects of communism, but kept the eroding people's freedoms, which is it's an existential crisis for a lot of libertarian thinkers, because it actually did. Milton Friedman dealt with it, where he says you can have economic progress without freedom, but you can't have freedom without economic progress. That's the problem there. In China, we've seen a lot that they can have a dictatorship while also unlocking the power of the market. Iran, we already see their access to information online has helped lead to uprisings. They just need more of it. But yeah, I think the West should be fighting should enter into this war and fight fire with fire. I think that another thing, just to expand the topic a little bit, before I ask your question, Ayanda, is the broadly Russian interference in South Africa, because we've known for a while the ANC is friends with Putin in Moscow. They refused to outright condemn the invasion of Ukraine. They had that really stupid nuclear deal, and I know I'm pro-nuclear, but that was a stupid deal. It was very corrupt. We don't want Chernobyl boilers here. If we're going to be buying any nuclear technology, I want it to be from France. The only thing I want French made. And I think this is a broad idea of what can South Africans do. And I know we say we can't do anything, but at this point, we know Russia is insidiously gating itself into this country. It's supporting the ANC and MK party. It's literally stealing some of our young people and taking them to fight in Ukraine. That's the big thing with the Jacob Zuma has been accused of selling South Africans to Moscow in Parliament, I think. Wanda, what do you think that am I overblowing this? Is Russia not as big a threat to our South African way of life, to South Africa's potential prosperity, as I'm saying? And if it is there anything we can do about it?
Well, thank you very much, Nicholas, for that. I would not call Russia a threat to our national interest or whatever, but I would say that, like any other geopolitical player, they are a player in world politics, and naturally they will seek to expand their influence in many parts of the world, not just South Africa, but in many other countries on the African continent. Everyone, right, is doing that. Even the Chinese have their own strategy with the whole Gates thing, lending money to African states. So I don't think it's an inherently bad thing, right? I mean, a fundamental principle of international relations is all states are rational, self-interested actors. So states are always going to act in their own, self-interest. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But the Zuma thing, for me, it touched a very raw nerve in me, because this is something I've I've been following, right? And the other day I saw the Minister of International Relations, I think it's Mr. Ronald Lamula, who I don't know how he got that position to begin with, but never mind that. I heard him after the SONA saying, Zuma sent these boys to fight in the war against Ukraine. They were duped and everything, and now we've managed to bring, I think, four of them back, if I'm not wrong. Others are still behind, but they're trying to bring them back too. And that immediately reminded me, of kings, African kings back then, right? Way back then, when African kings were still selling their own people to Portuguese slave traders, right? This is not popular history these days. If you mention this, you're sanitizing history, you're defending colonizers and everything. But it's like, it reminded me of people who claim to represent certain people. We represent these Black people, poor Black people. We are revolutionaries. We are a Marxist organization and whatnot. We're pushing for nationalization and everything. But these are the same people who are taking young, able-bodied men, duping them and sending them to another part of the world to go and fight in wars that have nothing to do with the African continent or them. So it touches a raw nerve in me, because it reminds me of that history. To say race politics is a problem for that, right? Because it forces you to ignore those things amongst people who just happen to share the same skin color as you, but are taking young men across the world, to go and fight in these wars. But to what you've said, Nicholas, 2 points to piggyback on Martin. The first one is to Ryan Kutsia and to Carl Steenkamp. Stop saying that the current criticism of the DA is some Kremlin-inspired operation. Stop saying that. I've literally been seeing the things they're saying these days. And they are being opportunistic, because what we're discussing now has nothing to do with it. The fact that Rob Dugan and others are criticizing them has nothing to do with Russia. And Martin is entirely correct when he says that this is something which they're going to use going forward. To say any criticism of the party, is being funded or has been inspired somehow by the Kremlin. It is concerning for me. To my last point, Helen Zill says that the state security agency must investigate this. No, it must not investigate this. We are in the marketplace of ideas. We're in the marketplace of ideas. Let's compete. The people themselves are going to decide what is the truth. I don't think anyone should be allowed to decide that. We know for a fact, and this is something that Rebecca Davis of Daily Maverick, I think she's a piece of something, but I won't mention it. But she wrote an article not long ago saying that, democracies are under threat. Misinformation is going to destroy our democracies. There needs to be a good faith attempt to fact check things, right? Because right-wingers pump all these conspiracy theories. And I'm like, number one, we know for a fact that mainstream media outlets across the world have left-leaning journalists. This is a trend. It's a well-known trend. Even in America, it's a well-known thing. Number two, are you telling me that the people who run these mainstream media outlets are not biased, that they are somehow above the rest of us? No, that isn't true. They're human beings like the rest of us. They have their own agenda, and that bias reflects in the things that they write. I mean, here in South Africa, we have the guys from News 24. We know them. We know those guys. Those guys are biased, and their writing clearly targets a certain segment of South African politics. We know that. So this idea that there can be neutral arbiters of truth somewhere who can sit in some room and say this is right and this is wrong, that is a nonsensical idea. As I've said, we are in the marketplace of ideas. Is there disinformation? Yes, there is. There's lots of it. And in our country, most of it comes from government side. And then, of course, they literally have bot accounts that they create. I mean, even this new podcast I won't mention, there's a new podcast in this space. That entire podcast is literally propped up by bot accounts. You go through a comment section and you see the same comment like 10 times. You can see that these are bots. You have people who deliberately push this narrative and say there are people who are speaking about genocide. It's a red herring. No one has ever mentioned genocide. But we have loads of disinformation in this country. But even with that, none of us have ever said that those people should be somehow silenced or they should be stopped. We are saying that we are in a marketplace of ideas. It is people themselves who are going to decide what is right, what is wrong, what is truth, and what isn't true. But if we're going to outsource that to the likes of Rebecca Davis and many others in the mainstream press establishment of South Africa, we would be making a big mistake, because they themselves are guilty of disinformation. They've had to apologize on many occasions. So if we did take that approach, what should we have done with them for those things? So just to tie it up together, Nicholas, I think on the whole Russian thing, Russia has influence in our politics. There's nothing we will do about that. I think the Russians are backing the MK party. I'm willing to say that explicitly. I'm not taking it back. They are backing them in some way. And this entire debacle with the young men going to fight in the war against Ukraine strongly suggests that there is some kind of link. Maybe the Russians are seeing the MK as a rising political vehicle and they think it can advance their own interests. Maybe that's the logic around that. But I have no issue with it. And the DA must not, going forward, then try to be opportunistic, the Ryan Coetzee of this world, and say that Rob Dugan and others are linked to Russians. I mean, even if you think about this yourself, how are Rob and them linked to Russians? Carl, in fact, removed that post about it being a Kremlin. And he knew why he removed it, because he knew that it's nonsensical, it's ridiculous. So Russia, no. The whole disinformation thing, it's unfortunate, it happens. The Russians have interfered in many other parts of the world. And I mean, at some point, Trump asked them, stop interfering in our own elections. So they have a highly sophisticated sort of technological thing going on. And you're not going to be able to stop that. It's reality. But the DA mustn't be opportunistic about it. They must respond to the criticism in good faith, because the criticism comes from a good place. People would not be criticizing the DA if they hated it. We criticize you because we believe you can play an important role in politics, and where we feel that you're going off the rails a bit, we're pushing it back onto them. But don't be opportunistic about it.
I agree. I think we should just rename the podcast to the we don't hate you, DA. We insult you because we care. Because we do have higher standards for the DA because they are the most viable opposition party, and I think that is correct. That as you said, Martin, as you said, our main concerns with the DA is that they haven't been handling themselves in the GNU as much as well as we would like. Also, I would like to expand that and I think we can all say this for some of us who have been friends with people in the DA. And I have a lot of people who I really respect in the DA, but I also know some people who were not DA members and became DA members, and I saw the shift of their personality. It is a little bit like a cult, as a lot of parties are. They don't like criticism. They don't like receiving criticism. They act against it very, very knee-jerkingly. They don't respond well to it, and it's and that's why I think that why we had this thing from when you say what's Carl tweeted that conflating this Russian gate stuff, disinformation, with what people are actually saying. The problem with the DA is they're terrible at marketing, and as I said, but that Western government should be fighting fire with fire, the DA should be as well. And I don't mean spreading misinformation or disinformation, but they should be saying, hey, this is how these bot accounts are spreading this disinformation against us. How can we take something which we know is true and dominate the algorithms so our truth rises above the disinformation? And that's something which I think Western governments fail at, the DA is failing at. To a degree, we fail at that. We're not that good at that. There's a reason that we don't get as high numbers as a lot of these other accounts, because we don't play the game unethically. Yes, Martin?
We lack the Machiavellian spirit. We need the people who favor freedom need to develop a strong sense of Machiavellianism. It just can't be otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that I just wouldn't know where to start. Like I don't know how to start a bot farm. Like it's something maybe I should Google it. Maybe, but like that is the thing is that there are plenty of things which we can think of, which would expand the cause for liberty. Like getting on TikTok, the brain rot damn platform, and gaming their algorithms with bot accounts in order to push our takes on certain issues. That would work. I think that as long as we don't touch on an anti-Beijing issue, the algorithms probably wouldn't nerf us. We could do that. I don't want to, but I really don't want to dirty my hands like that. I don't want to have to put TikTok on my device. I've already got Google and Facebook and Meta and everyone else listening to me. I don't want Beijing listening to me. And I think that that's probably at the end of the day. Yes, that I think we can all agree it will be digital whack-a-mole. We can't actually stop them from saying it. It's a fool's errand to stop them from saying it. And if you try, as you said, Martin, it actually enables authoritarian governments too many powers that for the good of society. So rather, I think we need to learn how can we actually use the tools of evil, but for good, to make it sound like a fantasy novel. Martin, we're over an hour now. Do you have any closing points before I end off?
Yeah, no, I guess just in summary, kind of from our first discussion, I would encourage people to just have a look at the Section 12 initiatives proposals for fighting violent crime. These really are practical things, and one of the issues with crime in South Africa is people think this is this unsolvable behemoth of a problem, and it's not. We have a public policy issue that's standing in the way of solving the problem, and it kind of links up with kind of the second half of the discussion, which is that South Africans are too, I don't know, we have a weird sense of decency where this idea of, well, we can't really do something forceful to solve problems. We have to kind of, there's this fallacy going around that the South African constitution is pro-criminal and it kind of protects the criminals, and that's the problem. We need a new constitution. The constitution doesn't say any of that. It just says, it kind of says you have to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. It doesn't say that the police cannot be more forceful. It doesn't say that the government can have innovative ways of fighting crime. Certainly doesn't, like they say, the right to life helps criminals survive. No, you can shoot and kill criminals in this country. You can do that. You can actually do that, and we probably should be doing that a lot more. But obviously, with that kind of body cams and so on to make sure everything is done above board. But you can actually shoot criminals who are shooting at you and who are shooting at other people. You can do that. That's something you can do. But yeah, we have a weird sense of decency in this country, and a lot of these things. Same with my issue of the DA is I think we are overly reliant on Western advisors from European countries who we ship in by the boatload to this country, who come and advise our ministers and our director generals and our mayors and our premiers, and they give them a European take on how problems need to be solved. And I think that's a problem, and that's a problem for dealing with crime, and that's a problem with dealing with disinformation. The Europeans have this completely back to front, like they are the worst. With their Digital Services Act, they're going after X now, all these things because of, oh, it's disinformation. And actually, it's just because they don't like what some people are saying, and they're using the force of law to make that happen. Now, that's an issue. That is an issue. That is something that you have to expect any government that says it is going to deal with disinformation for it to push a very specific view of the world. There's nothing to do with truth, nothing to do with facts. It's going to be an ideological litmus test that's always going to be applied, even if the people applying the test don't know it. Like they are necessarily going to be applying a personal political preferences test to stuff that they deem as disinformation or fake news or whatever. And that is a European mentality that is being exported to places like South Africa. The FMF published a paper on the Brussels effect last year, October, I think, where we identified this specifically with tech legislation. And the Digital Services Act is one that has not yet quite made it to South Africa, but it is extremely clear that there is a keenness in South Africa for the government to acquire these powers. And specifically, Solly Mlatsi, the DA's communications minister, is now very keen on this age verification thing that's blown up in Europe and in Australia and so on. He's now keen on trying that in South Africa and regulating podcasts and all these things. Because I promise you, he had a European advisor in his office telling him about these things. That is what happened. So yeah, it all comes down to that. Get better advisors, get liberal bloody advisors. My goodness, why should we feel uncomfortable saying that? We need more people who value freedom advising the government, and they need to do so from a place of independence, because as Nicholas, you just pointed out in your last few words, we both know people who I would say were good libertarians, good classical liberals. They really got it. They really got how the world works. They understood the nature of politics. And then they went into the DA and, well, alas, those insights somewhat evaporated. And so we need the people advising the DA to actually advise them from outside, from a place of independence, so that they're not co-opted like the DA itself is being co-opted by its close relationship with the ANC. So yeah, better advisors on crime, better advisors on communication, and just accept that disinformation is lying. It's lying. Lying is part of human society. Understand that, accept it, and fight it with the truth, and fight it at scale, as you said, Nicholas. But don't try and get the government to now come in and be a daddy to stamp out lying. Thanks. Good show, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think this was a very interesting chat. And hopefully you guys will share it to far and wide so we can fight misinformation, or spread it, depending on if you agree with us or not. And make sure to, I just muted myself there by mistake. Make sure to visit us at rationalstandard.com. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an article. We might only have a weekly podcast, but we publish articles almost every single day. And it goes far more into depth on these topics. I've written recently about Russia and the threat I feel it poses to the world and South Africa, and how South Africa actually kind of helps it on its global agenda. So you can check that article. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and X, the website formerly known as Twitter. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss another one of these episodes. Please make sure to like and comment. It really helps the algorithms and helps those little robots figure out who to show us to people. We're not going to be using a bot farm, so you guys are going to have to be our bots, please. But most of all, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.